My daughter-in-law threw my late husband's jacket in the trash. When I picked it up, an envelope fell out with her name written in his handwriting. I whispered, "How is this possible? He died before they even met." Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. The trash bag felt heavier than it should have as I lifted it from the bin that morning. Something solid shifted inside, and through the thin plastic, I recognized the worn brown leather. Frank's jacket. The one he wore every autumn for 30 years. The one that still hung on his chair in the study like he might walk in any moment and slip it on. My hands trembled as I tore open the bag, pulling out the jacket that still carried the faintest trace of his pipe tobacco. Rachel stood in the doorway, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee mug. "Oh, Betty, I was just cleaning out some old things. That raggedy jacket was collecting dust." Her voice carried that sugary tone she used when she wanted something, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. I clutched the jacket to my chest, feeling the familiar texture of the leather against my fingers. That's when the envelope slipped from the inside pocket and fluttered to the ground like a fallen leaf. The handwriting on the front stopped my heart. Frank's distinctive cursive spelled out Rachel in the blue ink he always used, but Frank had been gone for 5 years, and Rachel had only married my son, Mike, 3 years ago. They had never met. My mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. I looked up at Rachel, whose face had gone pale, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. My name is Betty Morrison, and at 68 years old, I thought I had experienced all the surprises life could offer. I'd raised 2 boys in this house, the same house Frank and I bought 42 years ago with every penny we had saved. Back then, the neighborhood was new, full of young families with dreams as big as ours. Frank worked construction while studying for his engineering degree at night. I worked double shifts at the hospital, coming home just in time to get the boys ready for school, catching 3 hours of sleep before starting again. Those were hard years, but they were ours. Every sacrifice had a purpose. When Frank finally got his degree and landed a good job, we could have moved to a bigger house, a better neighborhood. But this place held our history. These walls had heard our boys' first words, seen their first steps. The kitchen table still bore the scratch from when Tom tried to carve his name at age 7. The door frame in the hallway still had the pencil marks tracking Mike and Tom's growth through the years. I never remarried after Frank passed. Some might call that foolish, but Frank wasn't just my husband. He was my anchor, my best friend. The only person who knew that I was afraid of thunderstorms and that I sang Patsy Cline songs when I cooked. His study remained exactly as he left it, down to the reading glasses on his desk and the bookmark in the last novel he never finished reading. People in the neighborhood knew me as the lady who brought casseroles when someone was sick, who kept extra cookies for the children walking home from school. My door was always open, especially after Frank died. I thought surrounding myself with family would ease the loneliness. Tom visited every Tuesday with his wife and kids. Mike and Rachel came for Sunday dinners, filling the house with conversation and life. But standing there, holding Frank's jacket and that impossible envelope, I realized that sometimes the people you feed at your table are the very ones sharpening knives behind your back. Sunday mornings in my house always began the same way. The coffee maker would gurgle to life at 6:30 sharp, filling the kitchen with the rich aroma of Frank's favorite Colombian blend. I still bought the same brand, still made a full pot, even though I only drank 2 cups. Old habits are like comfortable shoes. You don't replace them just because circumstances change. The morning sun would stream through the kitchen window, casting golden rectangles across the checkered linoleum floor that Frank installed himself the summer before he got sick. My garden was my sanctuary, especially in the early morning when dew still clung to the petals of Frank's roses. He had planted them along the fence line our first spring in the house, 1 bush for each year we'd been married. Now 42 bushes bloomed in succession from April through October, their perfume drifting through the open windows. I would spend an hour each morning tending them, trimming dead blooms, checking for aphids, whispering to them the way Frank used to. The neighbors probably thought I was going senile, talking to plants, but those roses were more than flowers. They were living memories. The house followed a comfortable routine that gave structure to my days. Mondays were for laundry, hanging sheets on the line out back, because Frank always said sunshine was nature's best disinfectant. Tuesdays meant Tom's visit with his family. I'd bake fresh banana bread because his daughter Emma wouldn't eat anything else at Grandma's house. Wednesdays, I volunteered at the church food pantry, sorting donations and packing boxes for families in need. Thursdays were for grocery shopping, following the same list I'd used for 20 years, adjusted now for smaller portions but never quite getting it right. Fridays, I cleaned the house top to bottom, everything except Frank's study. That room I only dusted, careful not to disturb the organized chaos of his papers, the stack of engineering journals he'd been meaning to read, the coffee mug with the cold ring stained permanent at the bottom. Sometimes I'd sit in his leather chair, wearing his old cardigan that hung on the back, and read from one of his books just to feel close to him again. But Sundays were the heartbeat of my week. Both boys would come with their families, filling the house with the kind of noise that made it feel alive again. Mike and Rachel usually arrived first, Rachel carrying a store-bought pie she'd transferred in my dish, pretending she'd made it herself. I never said anything. Keeping peace was more important than calling out small deceptions. Tom's family would burst through the door like a hurricane, his twin boys racing straight to the cookie jar while his wife, Sarah, helped me in the kitchen. The dining room table would groan under the weight of pot roast with all the fixings, Frank's mother's recipe that took 4 hours to prepare properly. We'd sit in the same seats we'd claimed years ago, Frank's chair at the head remaining empty but set with a plate anyway. The grandchildren would share their school adventures. Tom would complain about his boss, Mike would talk about his latest business venture, and Rachel would compliment everything while somehow making it sound like suggestions for improvement. After dinner, while the women cleaned up, the grandchildren would beg for stories about Grandpa Frank. I'd tell them about the time he built their fathers a treehouse that was so elaborate the city made him get a permit, or how he once drove 18 hours straight to bring me home when my mother was dying. These stories were treasures I polished with each telling, keeping Frank alive in the memories of grandchildren who barely remembered him. Life had found its rhythm again, a gentle melody of routine and family that softened the sharp edges of grief. I thought I had built something beautiful from the ashes of loss. I couldn't have known that Rachel was already planning to tear it all down. It started during Sunday dinner in early September, when the leaves were just beginning to turn gold outside the dining room window. Rachel was helping me serve the apple crisp when she paused, running her finger along the built-in china cabinet that Frank had installed himself 20 years ago. "Betty, this craftsmanship is incredible. They don't make houses like this anymore. Custom woodwork, original hardwood floors, that gorgeous stone fireplace. Have you ever had it appraised?" The question felt odd, like finding a sharp stone in your shoe. I laughed it off, spooning vanilla ice cream onto the warm dessert. Frank always said a home's value isn't in dollars, but in the memories made inside it. Rachel smiled, but something flickered in her eyes, quick as a hummingbird, there and gone before I could name it. As we ate dessert, she kept steering the conversation toward the house. "When was it built again? 1982. She pulled out her phone, tapping the screen. The Historical Society loves preserving homes from this era. Original features like yours are so rare now. She stood up suddenly, phone in hand. "Oh, this lighting is perfect. You mind if I take some photos? I've been following this interior design blog, and your crown molding is exactly the style they featured last week." Mike shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his spoon clinking against the bowl. "Rachel, Mom doesn't care about design blogs. Let's just enjoy dessert." But Rachel was already moving through the dining room, her phone camera clicking. She captured the bay window, the built-in shelving, even the brass door handles that Frank had specially ordered from a catalog. Tom's wife Sarah caught my eye across the table, her eyebrows slightly raised in that way that said she noticed it too. Rachel had never shown interest in interior design before. In 3 years of marriage to Mike, she'd never once commented on the house beyond obligatory pleasantries. Now suddenly, she was documenting every architectural detail like a real estate agent preparing a listing. "Rachel, honey, your dessert is getting cold," I called out, trying to draw her back to the table. She returned, sliding into her seat with her phone still in hand, swiping through the photos she'd taken. "I'm sorry, Betty, it's just such a beautiful home. Mike never told me the whole history. Did Frank do all these renovations himself?" The questions continued, each one seemingly innocent, but together forming an uncomfortable pattern. "Do you still have the original blueprints? What about the property deed? Is it true that corner lots like this are worth more? Does the house have any liens or mortgages?" Mike kept trying to change the subject, mentioning his work, the weather, anything else. But Rachel circled back like a persistent salesman. When she asked about Frank's life insurance policies, something cold settled in my stomach. "Why would you want to know about that, dear?" I kept my voice light, but my hands found the edge of the tablecloth, fingers worrying the hem. "Oh, I'm just trying to understand financial planning better," Rachel said, her laugh bright and false as costume jewelry. "Mike and I are thinking about our future, you know. Getting our affairs in order. You and Frank were so smart about these things." Tom cleared his throat loudly. "Speaking of the future, boys, why don't you tell Grandma about your science fair project?" His twins launched into an enthusiastic explanation about volcano models, breaking the strange tension that had settled over the table like fog. Later, as I walked them to the door, Rachel lingered in the hallway, studying the family photos on the wall. "Betty, you know, if you ever need help organizing Frank's papers or dealing with any financial matters, I'm here. That's what family does, right? We take care of each other." After they left, I stood in my quiet house, Rachel's words echoing in the silence. The questions felt like termites, small and seemingly harmless individually, but collectively capable of bringing down the entire structure. I shook my head, scolding myself for being suspicious of my daughter-in-law's sudden interest. But that night, I found myself locking Frank's study door, something I'd never done before. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed, Frank's pillow still on his side even after 5 years, and tried to make sense of my unease. Rachel had been nothing but helpful since joining our family. When Frank was in his final months, she'd driven Mike over every evening so he could spend time with his father. She'd sat with me in the hospital waiting room during Frank's last surgery, holding my hand when the doctor delivered the news that there was nothing more they could do. How could I suspect her of anything sinister based on a few questions about the house? The guilt wrapped around me like a scratchy wool blanket. Here was a young woman trying to learn about financial planning, showing interest in family history, and I was treating her like a criminal. I thought about my own mother-in-law, how she'd watched me with eagle eyes when I first married Frank, suspicious of the young nurse who'd captured her son's heart. I'd promised myself I would never be that kind of mother-in-law, the type who saw threats where there was only love. The next morning, I called my friend Dorothy, who'd been my sounding board for 40 years. "I think I'm becoming one of those terrible mothers-in-law," I confessed, explaining the situation while kneading dough for bread. Dorothy laughed, her voice warm through the phone. "Betty, honey, you're grieving. Sometimes grief makes us hold tighter to what we have left. Rachel's probably just trying to be helpful. You know how these young people are, always documenting everything on their phones." Dorothy was right, of course. This new generation lived differently. They photographed their meals, their outfits, their homes. Rachel was just being modern, and I was being an old fool, seeing shadows where there was only sunlight. I decided to make amends the best way I knew how, through food. I spent the entire Tuesday making Rachel's favorite lemon bars, the recipe she'd requested last Christmas. As the sweet citrus scent filled my kitchen, I remembered all the kind things Rachel had done. She always remembered my birthday, never came to dinner empty-handed, complimented my cooking even when I knew the roast was overcooked. When Mike had lost his job last year, she'd been the one encouraging him to start his own business, supporting his dreams. That evening, I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at Frank's rose garden bathed in golden twilight. "I'm being foolish, aren't I, Frank?" I whispered to the empty room. "You always said I worried too much, saw problems where there weren't any. Rachel's a good girl. She makes Mike happy. That's all that matters." I thought about the envelope with Rachel's name, still hidden in my dresser drawer. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe it was a different Rachel, someone from Frank's work. Maybe it was something he'd meant to give Mike to give to her, a welcoming note he'd prepared when he heard Mike was dating someone serious. Frank was thoughtful like that, always planning ahead, even when cancer was eating away at his body. Wednesday at the church food pantry, I mentioned my suspicions to Pastor William, disguising it as a hypothetical situation. He smiled kindly, his eyes crinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Betty, the Bible tells us that love believes all things, hopes all things. Sometimes we have to choose trust, even when doubt whispers in our ear. Family is built on faith in each other." By Thursday, I had fully convinced myself that I was being paranoid. Grief, loneliness, and age were playing tricks on my mind. I wrapped the lemon bars in Rachel's favorite decorative tin, added a note apologizing for being distant lately, and planned to give them to her on Sunday. I even unlocked Frank's study, ashamed that I'd let suspicion drive me to such measures. Standing in Frank's study that afternoon, surrounded by his books and papers, I made a decision. I would choose to trust. I would choose to believe the best about Rachel, about my family. I would not become a bitter old woman, suspicious and alone, poisoning Sunday dinners with unfounded doubts. I had no idea how wrong I was. Thursday afternoon arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that Frank used to love. I was in the kitchen preparing a casserole for Mrs. Henderson next door, who'd just had surgery, when I heard the front door open. Strange, since I wasn't expecting anyone. Mike's voice called out, "Just me, Mom. Rachel forgot her reading glasses here on Sunday. We're heading to a business dinner, and she needs them." But it wasn't Mike's footsteps I heard heading upstairs. They were lighter, quicker, and they went straight to Frank's study instead of the dining room where Rachel had actually left her glasses on the china cabinet. I know because I'd found them Monday morning and set them aside to return. I climbed the stairs quietly, my socked feet silent on the carpet runner. The study door was ajar, and through the crack I could see Rachel at Frank's desk, methodically going through the drawers. Her hands moved with purpose, not like someone searching for glasses, but like someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. She had her phone out, taking pictures of documents before placing them back exactly as she'd found them. My heart hammered so loud I was certain she'd hear it. I backed away, returning downstairs as quietly as I'd come up. I grabbed Rachel's glasses from the china cabinet and was polishing them with a dish towel when she appeared in the kitchen doorway, slightly flushed. "Oh, Betty, you startled me. Mike said I left my glasses here, but I couldn't find them anywhere." Her smile was bright, but her eyes darted around the room like a trapped bird looking for an exit. "They were right here on the cabinet, dear?" I said, handing them over, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "I was just cleaning them for you. Where did you look?" "Oh, you know me, scatterbrained as always. I checked the bathroom, the living room." She waved her hand vaguely upward. "Even poked around upstairs thinking maybe I'd left them when I used the powder room." But the powder room was downstairs, and we both knew it. After she left with hurried thanks and a kiss on my cheek that felt like a betrayal, I went straight to Frank's study. Everything looked normal at first glance, but I knew this room like my own heartbeat. The third drawer on the right had been disturbed. Frank's military service records were facing the wrong direction. His filing system, which he'd maintained with engineers' precision, had been subtly disrupted. Documents about the house deed, his pension, our insurance policies, they'd all been touched, examined, photographed. That evening, I called Tom, trying to keep my voice casual. Did Rachel ask you anything about the house recently? There was a pause. Actually, yeah, last week at lunch she asked about property values in your neighborhood. Said she was curious about real estate as an investment. Why? Just wondering. She seemed interested during dinner on Sunday. I didn't tell him about finding her in the study. Not yet. I needed more than suspicious behavior. The next morning, I discovered Frank's war medals were missing from their display case in the living room. The Purple Heart he'd earned in Vietnam, the Bronze Star, his service ribbons, all gone. The case had been carefully rearranged, with the remaining items spread out to make the absence less noticeable, but I knew every piece in that collection. Frank had been so proud of his service, would spend hours telling the grandchildren about his brothers in arms. When I called Mike to ask about them, Rachel answered his phone. Oh, the medals. Yes, I took them to be professionally cleaned. They were looking so tarnished, and I wanted to surprise you. There's a specialty service that handles military memorabilia. They said it would take about 2 weeks. But when I called the 3 military memorabilia services in town, none had any record of Rachel bringing anything in. My hands shook as I hung up the phone after the third call. The evidence was becoming harder to ignore, like cracks spreading across a windshield. Rachel was lying to me, stealing from me. But the question that burned in my chest was why? And more importantly, what was Mike's role in all of this? Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching the growing dread in my chest. Mike and Rachel had come over unexpectedly, saying they wanted to help with yard work before tomorrow's family dinner. Mike was outside half-heartedly raking wet leaves while Rachel was inside, supposedly making coffee. But from the kitchen window, I could see Mike constantly checking his phone, glancing toward the house with an expression I'd seen before. The same guilty look he'd worn at age 10 when he broke my mother's china vase. I was heading to the bathroom when I heard Rachel's voice from the living room, low and urgent on her phone. Something made me stop in the hallway, my hand pressed against the wall for support as her words drifted through the doorway. Yes, I've documented everything. The old woman's been showing clear signs of confusion. Last week she couldn't find her reading glasses, accused me of moving them. Rachel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I know, right? She left them in the kitchen herself. Mike's been keeping track too. We have at least a dozen incidents recorded. My legs nearly gave out. I pressed harder against the wall, forcing myself to keep listening. The house is worth at least $800,000 in this market, maybe more with the corner lot. Those developers who bought the Murphy place would pay cash. Quick close. A pause. No, the brother won't be a problem. Tom already has his own property, much nicer than this old place. He's been worried about her living alone anyway. Mike's been working on him, suggesting she needs professional care. The room tilted. My own son. My Michael, who I'd nursed through pneumonia, who I'd held through his father's death, was conspiring against me. Listen, I have to go, Rachel continued, but once we get power of attorney, we move fast. The assisted living place on Elm Street has an opening. It's not luxury, but it's clean enough. She'll be safe, fed, medicated if she acts up. We'll sell the house, pay off our debts, and have enough left for that investment property in Florida. She paused again, listening. How much longer can she last anyway? She's 68, diabetic, already showing dementia signs. Even if she figures something out, who's going to believe a confused old woman over her concerned family? We're trying to help her, remember? That's our story. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly slipped into the bathroom, locking the door with trembling fingers. I turned on the faucet to mask the sound of my ragged breathing, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't confused or demented. She was heartbroken. When I finally emerged, Rachel was in the kitchen, humming while arranging cookies on a plate. My cookies, in my kitchen, while planning to steal my home. Oh, Betty, I made us some coffee and found these snickerdoodles in your cookie jar. You really shouldn't be climbing on chairs to reach high shelves at your age. That's how accidents happen. Where's Mike? My voice sounded strange, hollow. Still outside. Poor thing, he works so hard. We both do. That's why this house stuff is so stressful for him." She tilted her head, studying me with false concern. "Are you feeling all right? You look pale. Have you been taking your medications? Sometimes when people forget their pills, they can get confused, paranoid even." There it was, the groundwork for their lie. Every concerned question was ammunition, every offer of help another bar in the cage they were building around me. Mike came in then, leaves in his hair, avoiding my eyes. "All done, Mom. We should go, Rachel. That appointment, remember." "What appointment?" I asked, watching him squirm. "Just errands. You know." He kissed my cheek quickly, his lips cold and strange against my skin. "See you tomorrow for dinner." As they left, I heard Rachel whisper, "She's getting worse. Did you see how confused she looked?" And Mike, my baby boy, replied, "I know. We're doing the right thing. She needs help." I stood in my empty house, Frank's presence suddenly overwhelming. Our life together, our sacrifices, our dreams, all of it was being packaged and sold by the child we'd given everything to protect. The betrayal wasn't just theft, it was erasure, as if our entire lives meant nothing more than a real estate listing. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop my hands from shaking. I did what Frank had taught me during his years as an engineer: document everything. I went through every drawer, every file, every closet, cataloging what was missing. The list grew longer than I'd imagined. Frank's gold watch, gone. My mother's pearl necklace, vanished. The signed first edition books Frank had collected disappeared. Even the silver candlesticks from our wedding had been replaced with cheap replicas. But it wasn't until I checked our joint savings account online that the full scope hit me. Small withdrawals I hadn't made, each just under the amount that would trigger a bank alert. 500 here, 700 there, spanning the last 4 months, over $12,000 gone. The signature on the withdrawal slips at the bank would probably show signs of my confusion. Rachel must have had me sign papers mixed in with other documents, distracted me with conversation while my pen moved across forms I didn't really read. Sunday afternoon, before dinner, Tom arrived early with his family. I pulled him aside while his wife helped set the table. "Tom, has Mike talked to you about me lately?" He shifted uncomfortably, just like his father used to when avoiding difficult truths. "Mom, he's just worried about you. We both are." "What has he told you?" Tom sighed, running his hand through his hair. "Little things. You forgetting conversations, repeating stories more than usual, leaving the stove on. Rachel found you in the garden at midnight last week, confused about what time it was. Tom, I haven't been in the garden at midnight since your father died. I can barely see in the dark anymore." But I could see the doubt in his eyes. They'd been feeding him stories for months, building a narrative so complete that even my own firstborn questioned my sanity. Tom loved me, but love could be manipulated, especially when wrapped in concern. The doorbell rang and suddenly my house filled with people. Not just family, but 3 neighbors Rachel had invited spontaneously. Mrs. Patterson from across the street, the Johnsons from next door, and even my old friend Margaret, who I hadn't seen in months. Rachel played the perfect daughter-in-law, solicitous and caring, while occasionally shooting Mike meaningful glances. During dinner, the trap revealed itself piece by piece. Mrs. Patterson mentioned how worried she'd been when Rachel told her about finding me wandering the street in my nightgown. A complete fabrication, but Mrs. Patterson believed it entirely. The Johnsons expressed relief that family was stepping in after Rachel had shared concerns about my ability to maintain the house. Margaret, sweet Margaret, patted my hand and said she understood how hard it must be to admit I needed help. "We've actually been looking into some wonderful assisted living communities," Rachel announced, producing glossy brochures from her purse. "There's one on Elm Street that has an opening, full medical staff, structured activities, 3 meals a day. Doesn't that sound nice, Betty?" The room spun as everyone nodded approvingly. This wasn't just theft anymore. It was a coordinated campaign to destroy my credibility, my independence, my life. They'd turned my community against me with carefully planted lies, each person in this room now a witness to my supposed decline. Mike cleared his throat. We've already talked to a specialist about power of attorney. It's really the safest option, Mom. This way, we can make sure all your affairs are handled properly, bills paid on time, medical decisions made appropriately. And the house? I asked quietly. Rachel's hand covered mine, her nails digging in slightly. Well, it's far too big for one person, and the maintenance alone must be overwhelming. The proceeds from selling it would cover your care for years, ensure you get the best treatment possible. Tom looked uncomfortable, but didn't disagree. The neighbors nodded sympathetically. In their eyes, I saw myself transformed from the capable woman who brought casseroles and kept perfect roses into a pitiful, confused old lady who needed to be managed. They'd stolen more than money and medals. They'd stolen my reputation, my dignity, my own son's trust in my mental capacity. The conspiracy was complete, airtight, with witnesses who genuinely believed they were helping. How do you fight a lie that everyone wants to believe because the truth is too ugly to accept? After everyone left, I stood in my empty kitchen, mechanically washing dishes while my mind shattered into 1,000 pieces. The water scalded my hands, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel anything except the enormous weight of betrayal crushing my chest, making each breath a monumental effort. The plate I was washing slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the floor. I stared at the pieces, seeing my life reflected in the broken china. I found myself in Frank's study without remembering walking there. My legs gave out and I collapsed into his leather chair, pulling his jacket from where it hung. The smell of him, faint but still there, broke something inside me that I'd been holding together with stubborn will. The tears came like a dam bursting, 40 years of marriage reduced to gasping sobs that shook my entire body. How did we raise him, Frank? I whispered to the empty room, clutching his jacket like a lifeline. Where did we go wrong? Memories flooded back, each one a fresh wound. Mike at 5, crying in my arms after nightmares, promising he'd never leave me. Mike at 15, working summer jobs to help pay for his college fund because he didn't want us to struggle. Mike at 25, standing beside Frank's hospital bed, swearing he'd take care of me always. Every sacrifice we'd made, every double shift I'd worked, every vacation we'd skipped to save for their futures. It had all led to this moment, sitting alone while my son plotted to lock me away. I remembered the morning Frank died, how Mike held my hand in the hospital room. "Don't worry, Mom," he'd said, tears streaming down his face. "I'll make sure you're never alone. Dad asked me to protect you, and I will. I promise." That promise echoed in the empty room, mocking me with its broken sincerity. The photo albums on Frank's shelf caught my eye, and against my better judgment, I pulled one down. Our wedding photo stared back at me. Frank in his ill-fitting suit, me in a second-hand dress, both of us radiant with hope. We'd built everything from nothing. The early years in a cramped apartment, sharing one car, eating beans and rice for weeks to afford Tom's asthma medication. Frank studying by candlelight during power outages, determined to finish his degree. Me collapsing into bed after 16-hour shifts, my feet so swollen I could barely walk. Page after page showed our life unfolding. Birthday parties with homemade cakes because bakery ones were too expensive. Christmas mornings with presents wrapped in newspaper, but the boys' faces glowing with joy. Family vacations to the lake because Disney was out of reach, but those summers were magical anyway. Frank teaching the boys to fish, to change a tire, to shake hands firmly and look people in the eye. A photo from Mike's wedding stopped me cold. Frank was already sick then, chemotherapy having stolen his thick hair. But he'd insisted on walking tall, giving his blessing to Mike and Rachel's union. In the picture, he's shaking, Mike's hand, and now I could see what I'd missed then. Frank's expression wasn't entirely happy. There was something else, a shadow of concern in his eyes as he looked at Rachel. Even then, even dying, he'd seen something I hadn't. The album fell from my lap as a fresh wave of grief crashed over me. Not just for Frank, but for the son I'd lost to greed. The house felt alive with ghosts, phantom footsteps of toddlers learning to walk, echoes of teenage arguments about curfews, the silence where Frank's laughter should be. Every corner held a memory, and Rachel wanted to sell them all to the highest bidder. I cried until my eyes burned and my throat was raw. I cried for the naive woman who'd baked lemon bars for her deceiver, for the mother who'd failed to see her son's corruption, for the wife whose husband had tried to warn her from beyond the grave. The tears pooled on Frank's jacket, and I imagined them reaching him somehow, wherever he was. "I can't do this alone," I whispered to his photograph on the desk. "You were the strong one. You would know what to do. I'm just a foolish old woman who trusted too much and saw too little." The house settled around me with familiar creaks, but tonight they sounded like accusations. How many times had Rachel been here plotting? How many family dinners had been reconnaissance missions? How long had Mike been looking at me and seeing not his mother, but an obstacle to wealth? I sat in that chair until dawn broke through the study windows, painting Frank's books gold with early morning light. My tears had long since dried, leaving salt tracks on my cheeks and a strange emptiness in my chest. Somewhere during those dark hours between midnight and sunrise, something fundamental shifted inside me. The grief didn't leave, but it transformed, crystallizing into something harder, sharper, more useful. My fingers found the envelope again, the one from Frank's jacket with Rachel's name in his careful handwriting. I'd been afraid to open it, terrified of what truth it might contain. But fear was a luxury I could no longer afford. With trembling hands, I broke the seal and unfolded the paper inside. "My dearest Betty," it began, and my heart clenched seeing his handwriting again. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've found cause to search my jacket. I pray I'm wrong, but I've worked with enough men to recognize the look of greed when I see it. Rachel troubles me. I hired a private investigator. Forgive me for not telling you, but you were so happy Mike had found someone. The investigator discovered she was involved in 2 previous relationships with older men whose elderly parents died or were institutionalized shortly after the marriages. Both times, property was sold quickly, money disappeared. I have no definitive proof of wrongdoing, but the pattern disturbs me. The investigator's full report is in my safe, behind your mother's portrait. The combination is our anniversary. Protect yourself, my love. Be stronger than you think you are. All my love, Frank." My hand stopped shaking. Frank's safe, the one I'd never opened since his death, suddenly seemed to pulse with possibility behind my mother's portrait. I stood up, my knees protesting after hours in the chair, and moved the painting aside. The safe door swung open on the 3rd try. I'd been using the wrong anniversary year, forgetting Frank always used the year we met, not the year we married. Inside, along with Frank's will and military discharge papers, was a thick manila folder marked "Confidential." The private investigator's report was thorough, professional, and damning. Rachel Henderson, formerly Rachel Martinez, formerly Rachel Thompson. 3 names, 3 marriages, 2 suspicious deaths, and 1 elderly woman currently in a state facility, unable to communicate due to sudden onset dementia. Bank records showing large transfers after each incident. A pattern as clear as footprints in snow. I sat back down, the folder heavy in my lap. Frank had known. Even while cancer ravaged his body, he'd spent his energy and our savings to protect me. The tears threatened again, but this time I pushed them down. Frank had given me weapons. Crying over them would dishonor his gift. "You protected me even in death, Frank," I said to his photograph, my voice steady for the first time in days. "Now it's my turn." I thought about everything they'd taken, everything they'd planned to take. My home, my dignity, my freedom, my family's trust. They'd turned my own son into a stranger and my neighbors into unwitting accomplices. They'd crafted a narrative where I was the helpless victim, too confused to fight back, too old to matter. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated Betty Morrison. I wasn't some fragile flower who would wilt at the first sign of conflict. I was the woman who'd worked double shifts while raising 2 boys, who'd held her husband's hand through chemotherapy, never letting him see her cry, who'd buried the love of her life and still got up the next morning to tend his roses. I'd survived worse than Rachel's schemes and Mike's betrayal. The morning sun climbed higher, warming my face through the window. I stood up, placing Frank's jacket carefully on his chair, and walked to his desk. From the drawer, I pulled out his old address book, the one he'd refused to digitize despite Mike's teasing. Flipping through the pages, I found what I was looking for. James Patterson, attorney at law. Frank's old army buddy who'd handled our will. A man who'd once told me over dinner that he specialized in elder law and had seen too many families torn apart by greed. I picked up the phone, my finger steady as I dialed. James, it's Betty Morrison, Frank's widow. I need your help. It seems I'm about to go to war. James Patterson arrived at my house Tuesday morning, carrying a briefcase and wearing the same determined expression I'd seen when he'd helped Frank fight the insurance company over his cancer treatment. Betty, I've reviewed everything you sent me, he said, settling into Frank's study. The private investigator's report, the bank records, the missing items list. We have enough to build a case, but we need more. We need them to incriminate themselves. Over coffee and strategy, we developed our plan. James had seen this before. Families destroyed by greed. Elderly parents discarded like yesterday's newspaper. The key, he explained, is to let them think they've won while documenting everything. I'm going to recommend a forensic accountant to trace those withdrawals, and we'll need video evidence of their discussions. That afternoon, while Mike and Rachel were at work, James brought over a security specialist who installed tiny cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway, all common areas where I had every right to monitor my own home. These are motion-activated, he explained, showing me how to access the footage on a tablet he'd configured. Everything uploads to a secure cloud server that your lawyer can access, legal and admissible in court. The hardest part was pretending to deteriorate. James coached me through it like a director preparing an actor. Don't overplay it, he warned. Subtle confusion is more believable than dramatic episodes. Repeat questions occasionally, misplace items they'll notice, but stay consistent with your supposed decline. I started small. When Rachel visited Thursday, I asked her 3 times if she wanted tea, acting flustered when she pointed out she already had a cup. I forgot. Mike was coming for dinner and acted surprised when he arrived. Each performance was agony, watching their exchanged glances of satisfaction, seeing them document my episodes in a notebook Rachel thought she hid well in her purse. The forensic accountant James recommended, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, uncovered more than we'd expected. The withdrawals from your account match deposits into an account under Rachel's maiden name, she reported. She's been siphoning money for 6 months, not 4. And there's something else. She's been in contact with a real estate developer about your property. They've already discussed preliminary terms for a cash sale, contingent on her having power of attorney. Meanwhile, the cameras captured everything. Rachel on the phone with her lawyer, discussing how quickly they could process an incompetency claim. Mike reluctantly admitting he felt guilty, but that the money would secure their future. Rachel practicing her concerned daughter-in-law speech for the court, complete with fake tears and trembling voice. Most damning was Rachel telling Mike about her previous successes with elderly relatives, though she was careful never to admit to crimes explicitly. I discovered Rachel had been stealing more than objects. She'd been photographing Frank's personal papers, his journals, even our love letters, probably looking for anything valuable or blackmail-worthy. The violation felt like being stripped naked in public, but it also fueled my determination. This woman had invaded every sacred corner of my life. James had me open a new bank account at a different bank, transferring most of my funds there secretly. Financial abuse is easier to prove when there's a clear paper trail, he explained. We also documented every missing item with photos from old insurance records, establishing their value and disappearance timeline. The private investigator James hired, not Frank's original one, but equally thorough, followed Rachel for a week. She visited 3 pawn shops, selling my mother's jewelry and Frank's medals. Each transaction was photographed, receipts obtained through legal means. She was building her nest egg from my family's treasures. We'll give them 1 more week, James decided. Let them get comfortable, maybe even get that power of attorney paperwork drawn up. Then we spring it. I'm thinking of a family gathering, something public where they can't control the narrative. I suggested our wedding anniversary dinner, Frank's and mine. It would be October 15th, a Sunday, and tradition demanded both boys attend with their families. I'll invite the neighbors too, I said, the ones Rachel's been lying to, and maybe some of Frank's old colleagues who still check on me. James smiled, the kind of smile that reminded me why Frank had always said never to play poker with lawyers. Perfect. They want to paint you as incompetent in front of witnesses? Let's give them exactly what they want, right until we don't. Sunday arrived with the kind of pristine autumn weather that felt like Frank had arranged it specially from above. The house buzzed with preparation, every surface gleaming, the dining room table extended to accommodate 30 guests. I'd spent the morning making Frank's mother's famous pot roast, the one that took 4 hours and filled the house with memories. My hands moved through familiar motions while my heart raced with anticipation of what was to come. Rachel arrived early, carrying a store-bought cake she tried to pass off as homemade and wearing my mother's pearl necklace, bold as brass. "Oh, Betty, you look tired. Did you remember to take your medications this morning?" Her voice dripped with false concern as she guided me to a chair, patting my hand like I was a child. "Did I?" "I can't seem to recall," I replied, letting my eyes go slightly unfocused. The cameras were rolling, capturing her satisfied smirk. Mike followed, avoiding eye contact as he carried in wine bottles. His guilt was eating him alive. I could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly, but not enough guilt to stop him. "Mom, maybe you should rest before everyone arrives. We can handle everything." "Such good children," I murmured, watching Rachel's jaw tighten at being called my child. Guests began arriving at 5. Tom and his family first, his wife Sarah watching me carefully, looking for signs of the deterioration Mike had been reporting. Then came the neighbors, Mrs. Patterson clutching a sympathy casserole, the Johnsons with their concerned faces, Margaret dabbing at her eyes before she even entered. Frank's former colleagues arrived in a cluster, men who'd known me for 30 years, now seeing me through the lens of Rachel's lies. Rachel had orchestrated the seating perfectly, placing herself at the center where she could control the conversation. As we ate, she steered every topic toward my supposed decline. "Betty asked me 3 times yesterday if I wanted tea," she announced with a sad laugh. "We really need to discuss her future care." "It's heartbreaking," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "When you told me about finding her in the garden at midnight, I knew something had to be done." I sat quietly, occasionally forgetting someone's name, watching Rachel's confidence grow with each sympathetic nod from our guests. The briefcase beside her chair contained the power of attorney documents. I'd seen her checking them twice already. After dinner, as I stood to clear plates, Rachel gently pressed me back down. "No, Betty, you rest. Mike and I have something important to discuss with everyone." She stood, smoothing her dress, preparing for her performance. "As many of you know, we've been concerned about Betty's declining mental state for months now," she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Mike and I have struggled with this decision, but we can't ignore the signs anymore. Just last week, she left the stove on all night. She's been withdrawing large sums of money and can't remember what she spent it on. We found her trying to drive to the hospital to see Frank." Gasps rippled through the room. Tom's face had gone pale. Sarah gripped his hand. The neighbors murmured among themselves, and Frank's colleagues looked stricken. Mike stood up, his voice thick. "We've consulted with specialists. They agree Mom needs professional care, somewhere with full-time staff who can monitor her medications and keep her safe." Rachel pulled out the glossy brochures. Elm Street Senior Living has an opening. It's clean, professional, and they specialize in memory care. The house would need to be sold to cover the costs. But Betty's safety is what matters most. "We have power of attorney documents prepared," Rachel continued, producing the briefcase with a flourish. "Our lawyer assured us this is the best way to protect Betty's interests. With family and friends as witnesses, we can make this transition as smooth as possible." The room held its breath. Every eye turned to me as Rachel approached with the documents and a pen, her smile soft and poisonous. "Betty, sweetheart, we just need your signature. It's for your own good." I looked around the room at these people who'd known me for years, now ready to sign away my life based on clever lies. Tom had tears in his eyes. Margaret was openly weeping. Even Frank's former colleague Robert, who'd once called me the sharpest woman he knew, looked convinced. Rachel placed the pen in my hand, guiding it toward the signature line. "Right here, Betty. Just sign and we'll take care of everything." The moment had come. 30 people watched as I gripped the pen, my hand trembling slightly as it hovered over the document that would end my freedom. My hand stopped an inch from the paper. I set the pen down with deliberate precision and looked up at Rachel, letting the confusion drop from my eyes like a discarded mask. "No, I don't think I will." The room went silent. Rachel's smile flickered, uncertain. "Betty, you're confused. This is for your own good." "Actually, Rachel, I haven't been confused at all. Just curious to see how far you'd go." I stood up slowly, my voice gaining strength with each word. "But before we discuss your plans for my future, I have something to share with everyone." From beneath my chair, I pulled out Frank's envelope and the private investigator's folder. "My late husband left me this. He hired a private investigator before he died because he recognized something in you, Rachel. Something dangerous." "This is ridiculous," Rachel started, but I continued. "Rachel Henderson, formerly Martinez, formerly Thompson. 3 marriages to men with elderly parents, 2 deaths under suspicious circumstances, 1 woman in a facility who mysteriously developed sudden onset dementia after her daughter-in-law gained power of attorney." I pulled out the photographs. "Mrs. Eleanor Thompson died 2 months after signing over her house. Mr. George Martinez, fatal fall downstairs 3 weeks after changing his will." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Rachel's face had gone white. "You can't prove anything. Those were accidents." "Perhaps, but this isn't." I picked up the tablet James had given me, connecting it to the television. "These are security camera recordings from my own home over the past 2 weeks." The screen flickered to life. There was Rachel, crystal clear on the phone. "The old woman's practically senile already. Another month and we'll have everything locked down. The house alone is worth a fortune." Next clip. Rachel to Mike. "Stop being so sentimental. Your mother's lived her life. This is our time now. Besides, my last mother-in-law was much harder to convince and I still managed it." The room was frozen, watching Rachel's true face revealed in clip after clip. Her lies about finding me wandering, her coaching Mike on what to tell Tom, her phone calls with the real estate developer already planning the sale of my home. That's illegal recording," Rachel sputtered. "Actually, it's not." James Patterson stepped forward from where he'd been waiting in the hallway. "Minnesota is a one-party consent state, and Betty has every right to record in her own home. I'm James Patterson, Betty's attorney, and I have here documented evidence of elder abuse, fraud, and theft." Patricia Chen, the forensic accountant, entered behind him. "We've traced $12,000 stolen from Mrs. Morrison's accounts, deposited into an account under your maiden name, Rachel. We also have receipts from 3 pawn shops where you sold stolen items belonging to Mrs. Morrison." 2 police officers appeared in the doorway. The room gasped collectively. Mrs. Patterson clutched her chest. Tom had stood up, his face cycling through shock, rage, and relief. "But the most damning evidence," I said, pulling out a recording device from my pocket, "is this conversation I had with Rachel yesterday, where she admitted everything, thinking I was too senile to remember." Rachel's voice filled the room from the recorder. "You stupid old woman, you won't even remember this conversation tomorrow. Yes, I took your precious metals. Yes, I've been planning this for months. Mike's too weak to do what needs to be done, but I'm not. You're going to sign those papers and you're going to disappear into that nursing home, and no one will believe a word you say because everyone already thinks you're losing your mind." Mike collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. "Rachel, how could you? My mother, God, Mom, I'm so sorry. She said you were sick, showing signs. I believed her because she's very good at this," Officer Martinez said, stepping forward with handcuffs. "Rachel Henderson, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and grand theft. You have the right to remain silent." "Mike!" Rachel screamed as the officers cuffed her. "Don't let them do this. Tell them about her confusion. Tell them." But Mike just sat there, broken, finally seeing the truth. The room watched in stunned silence as Rachel was led out, still protesting, still performing even as her audience abandoned her. "There's more," James announced. "We've been in contact with the families of Rachel's previous victims. The woman in the nursing home, Mrs. Martinez, she's being reevaluated by independent doctors. Turns out her dementia might have been medically induced. The investigation is ongoing." The truth hung in the air like thunder after lightning, leaving everyone stunned and recalibrating everything they thought they knew. The weeks following Rachel's arrest passed in a blur of legal proceedings, family reconciliations, and slow healing. Rachel was denied bail after prosecutors presented her as a flight risk, given her pattern of changing identities and targeting elderly victims. The investigation expanded when Mrs. Martinez, Rachel's previous mother-in-law, was properly evaluated by independent doctors. They discovered she'd been heavily over-medicated, keeping her in a confused state for 2 years. Within weeks of proper treatment, she became lucid enough to testify about Rachel's systematic abuse. The trial was swift. Rachel's lawyer tried to paint her as a misunderstood caregiver, but the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, the forensic accounting, the testimony from multiple victims, and Frank's prescient investigation created an ironclad case. She was convicted on multiple counts of elder abuse, fraud, and theft, receiving a 15-year sentence with no possibility of early parole. The judge, an elderly woman herself, delivered a scathing statement about predators who target society's most vulnerable members. Mike's journey was harder. The divorce papers were filed within days of Rachel's arrest, but the emotional damage ran deeper than any legal document could address. He came to see me the day after Rachel was sentenced, standing on my doorstep like a lost child, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I don't know how to apologize. I don't know if I even have the right to ask for forgiveness." His voice broke completely. Dad would be so ashamed of me. I pulled him into my arms, feeling him sob against my shoulder, the way he had as a boy with skinned knees and broken toys. "Your father would want you to learn from this," I said softly. "He would want you to become better, not bitter." Mike started therapy, working through how Rachel had manipulated him, playing on his financial insecurities and his genuine concern for my well-being. He genuinely believed some of her early lies about my forgetfulness, small gaslighting moments that seemed like nothing individually but built into a false narrative. The therapist helped him recognize the signs of manipulation he'd missed, the red flags hidden beneath Rachel's charm. Tom struggled too, guilt-ridden over how readily he'd believed Rachel's stories. "I should have trusted you, Mom. I should have known you better than that." We spent long afternoons talking, rebuilding the trust that Rachel had deliberately eroded. Sarah, his wife, became my fierce protector, screening every visitor and double-checking every document that came near me. The stolen items were gradually recovered. The pawn shops, faced with receiving stolen goods charges, cooperated fully. Frank's medals came home, along with my mother's jewelry and most of the valuable books. The money was harder to recover, tied up in various accounts and partially spent, but the court ordered restitution from any future earnings Rachel might have. I established the Frank Morrison Foundation for Elder Protection, using part of our savings to fund legal assistance for elderly victims of family fraud. James Patterson agreed to serve on the board, bringing his expertise and passion for justice. We partnered with local banks to create training programs about recognizing elder financial abuse. Mrs. Martinez, recovered enough to live independently again, became our first speaker, sharing her story to help others recognize the warning signs. The house felt different now, but not empty. Sunday dinners resumed. Smaller at first, just Tom and Mike's families as we rebuilt our rhythms. Mike was living with Tom temporarily while he got back on his feet, the brothers closer than they'd been since childhood. The grandchildren, who'd been shielded from the worst of it, knew only that Rachel had done bad things and was gone. They adapted with the resilience of youth, filling the house with laughter again. I kept Frank's jacket in his study, the envelope framed beside his photograph. Some days I'd sit in his chair wearing his cardigan and tell him about the trial, about Mike's recovery, about the roses that bloomed despite everything. I'd tell him how his protection had saved me, how his love had given me strength even after death. The neighborhood slowly adjusted their perception back to reality. Mrs. Patterson apologized profusely for believing Rachel's lies, bringing casseroles for weeks as penance. The Johnsons helped me install better locks and a more comprehensive security system. Margaret and I resumed our weekly coffee dates, though now she looked at me with a mixture of admiration and shame for having doubted me. One morning, 6 months after Rachel's conviction, I stood in Frank's rose garden as the sun painted the petals gold. Mike was inside making breakfast, a new tradition we'd started as part of his amends. Tom and his family would arrive soon for a weekend visit. The house hummed with life again, different from before, but perhaps stronger for having survived the storm. The roses were in full bloom that spring morning, each blossom a testament to resilience. Frank's 42 bushes had survived the harsh winter, just as I had survived Rachel's attempted destruction of my life. I knelt beside the newest addition, a 43rd rose bush I'd planted last month, a vibrant red climber that would grow strong and tall, reaching toward the sun despite any storms that might come. Mike had helped me plant it, his hand steady as he guided the roots into the earth, both of us understanding it represented new beginnings built on old foundations. As I watered the roses, I heard laughter from the kitchen where Mike was teaching his nephew Tom's secret pancake recipe, the one Frank had passed down, the one that required just a touch of vanilla and a lot of patience. These small moments had become precious, no longer taken for granted, but recognized as the gifts they were. Mike had moved into his own apartment 3 months ago, but he still came by every morning for coffee. Not out of guilt anymore, but out of genuine desire to rebuild what Rachel had nearly destroyed. I thought about Frank often in these quiet moments, how his love had transcended death itself to protect me. That envelope, waiting in his jacket pocket like a guardian angel, had been more than evidence. It had been a reminder that true love thinks ahead, protects, and endures. Frank had known I was stronger than I appeared, that beneath the gentle grandmother exterior lived a woman who had survived poverty, raised children through hardship, and held her dying husband's hand without flinching. He had trusted me to fight when the time came. The experience had taught me something valuable about family and greed, about how money can corrupt even the closest bonds if we're not vigilant. Rachel had seen my home, my savings, my possessions, and thought they were the treasure. She'd never understood that the real wealth was in Sunday dinners where 3 generations shared stories, in gardens tended with love, in photographs capturing moments that money could never buy. She had tried to steal my life by taking my things, not realizing that my life was in the love I'd given and received, the memories that no court document could erase. But perhaps the most important lesson was about trust and verification. Love doesn't mean blind faith. I had ignored my instincts about Rachel, dismissed Frank's concerns, chosen false harmony over honest confrontation. True love sometimes means asking hard questions, setting firm boundaries, and protecting ourselves even from those who claim to care for us. The grandmother who bakes cookies can also be the woman who fights back. Kindness and strength are not opposites, but partners. The foundation we'd established had already helped 12 elderly victims in our county alone. Each story broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. These weren't just statistics, but mothers and fathers, grandparents who had worked their whole lives only to have it stolen by those they trusted most. We'd created education programs, legal resources, and support groups. Mrs. Martinez and I spoke at senior centers, warning others about the signs we'd missed, the red flags we'd explained away. If sharing our pain could prevent even one elder from suffering as we had, then something good would come from our trials. Standing in my garden that morning, surrounded by Frank's roses and the sound of family in my kitchen, I realized that Rachel had failed not because she underestimated my intelligence, but because she underestimated the power of love. Frank's love that protected from beyond, my love for my family that gave me courage to fight, and ultimately, the love that brought us back together stronger than before. What would you do if you discovered your own family plotting against you? Would you have the courage to fight back, to risk losing everything to save yourself? Would you recognize the warning signs, the sudden interest in finances, the documented confusion, the isolation from other family members? If you're watching this and something feels wrong in your own family situation, trust that instinct. Seek help from someone outside the situation. A lawyer, a doctor, a trusted friend who knew you before. Document everything. Don't let politeness or family harmony prevent you from protecting yourself. And remember, you're not alone. There are resources, people who understand, and legal protections available. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below if you've experienced something similar, or if you have questions about protecting yourself or a loved one. Like and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and triumph, because sometimes the most important battles are fought not on grand stages, but in the supposed safety of our own homes. Remember, your life's value isn't in what you own, but in who you are. And no one, not even family, has the right to take that from you.